Call the meeting to order. We stand for Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Commissioner Anselmi Dalton, would you take roll, please?
Okay. All right. Commissioner Anselmi Dalton, obviously present. Commissioner Hosey?
Present.
Commissioner Cayley?
Here.
Commissioner Cott? Commissioner Lawson?
Present.
Online, great. Commissioner Vore? Commissioner Glick is traveling. He will be here, but not quite yet. So excused. Secretary Pence?
Excused.
Vice Chair Choma? And Chairman Craig?
Here.
Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Director Mead?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the first agenda item on the workshop is our financial status update, which is where we go over our accounts 1, 2, and 3 for the program. And then we'll also talk about our reservoir investment accounts. So turn to page 7 in your e-notebooks. That should be where it starts. And I'm going to hand things over to David Ray, our fiscal manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. David Ray, fiscal manager for the Water Development Office. So like the director said, we are going to give you our annual financial status update. The state's fiscal year, just as a reminder, runs from July 1st through June 30th. So at the end of each fiscal year, as we're balancing the books, we run through and create projections to figure out what the estimated balance available is heading into the legislative session for water development accounts 1, 2, and 3. So that's the first thing we're going to walk through here. We'll start on page 8 of the PDF. This is the projection for account 1. For this one, I'll go through a little bit more of the detail just as a reminder of what the process looks like. But when we get to accounts 2 and 3, I'll just give you the balance, if that makes sense. So what you're looking at here, we start at the top of that page with last year's cash balance as of June 30th, 24. We then account for the actual revenue that we received during this last fiscal year 25. The majority of that comes from our taxes from severance distribution. Then there's also investment income from the cash balance in our account. That's that next line there. The next line is principal and interest repayment from loans within that account. And then the other line encompasses things like water sales, various other small sources of revenue that we receive throughout the year. So then there's a total there for how much revenue we collected within the year. Next, you'll see the total expenditures out of that account in this fiscal year. And then that leaves us with a cash balance at the end of June 30 of 25, which was at the end of this fiscal year that we just closed. Sure. Then the next section here, the outstanding commitments, you'll see the active appropriations there. That's $147,812,153. Those are the open encumbrances contracts that we have within account 1 right now. So we have to treat them as an obligation. Next, you'll see that expenditures paid, and then we're left with a total commitment, $97,481,936. When you take that away from the existing cash balance at June 30, that leaves us the total uncommitted balance. So we're on the right side of that finally this year. Last couple of years, we've been on the wrong side of that, if you remember. But $11,484,732. That's where we're at today. If everything got shut off, we got no future revenue, and we just had to pay out our existing commitments, we'd be left with that balance. So then to get to our estimated balance, and I'll warn you here that this estimated balance is actually a biennial figure, meaning it's for the next 2 years. So for essentially for fiscal year 27 and 28, if you think about it. So when we get to that number at the bottom, what we typically do heading into the session is think about sort of dividing that in half. So half for 1 year, half for the next year. Now, depending on the recommendations in November, that might shift one way or the other, but usually we try to kind of keep it even. So to get to that estimated balance, we add in the estimated revenues for the rest of this biennium, fiscal year 26, and the full biennium 27 and 28. When we get down to the bottom of that, you'll see a balance available for appropriation, $78,377,232. That sounds amazing, but we're headed into a budget year. And we remember from our prior discussions that Water Development Account 1 funds a number of non-project admin type costs. So we need to subtract those estimated budget hits before we can get to the real number. So those are down here in a short little table below that. You'll see our 10% match for the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. That's estimated. These are estimates right now. We're not far enough along in the budget process to know exactly what those numbers are, but $2,608,520 for that match. The Department of Ag, we've got $683,365. That's based off of their last budget request 2 years ago. The State Engineer's Office, the Interstate Streams program, $118,381. And then the big one we talk a lot about, the State Engineer's Office, the Border Control Division, their entire budget. This estimate we obtained from their fiscal staff heading into the budget, but they gave us a number of $15,454,264. That may change as we move through the budget process. And then, of course, our agency budget, which we're estimating roughly at $10,035,511. Again, that may change as we step through the budget process. So that is a total of non-project admin commitments of $28,900,041. So the number that you're most concerned about, the 2-year number that we estimate being available for Water Development Account 1 is $49,477,191. And then we could essentially divide that in half for what we might think about being available to appropriate this year. So, Mr. Chairman, if there aren't any questions yet, I will move on to the balances for account 2 and 3.
Are there any questions for David? There's a question, David. Senator Larson.
How about a comment, if that would be okay, Mr. Chairman?
Certainly.
Pretty much like always, that we've harped on this for quite a few years on the dollars that it takes out of account 1 to fund the State Engineer's Office Board of Control. I'll work very hard to get that out of the budget through the JAC or some way, but that was put in quite a while ago by some that were on JAC that just didn't like water for some reason. We need to make sure our cities and counties and irrigation districts and all those that are using account 1 to make sure they notify their legislators of how important the dollars are, that they don't go to a constitutionally required mandate, to control water. It shouldn't be coming out of account 1. It should be coming out of the general fund. So I'll harp on that for a long time.
Mr. Chairman, just to provide a quick update on that, we have had some conversations with the State Engineer's Office, their leadership, and I think folks from the Governor's Office as well. And I believe the State Engineer's Office is submitting an exception request during this budget to request changing the funding source from Water Development Account 1 to General Fund. So that will be going before the Governor's Office and then hopefully with their approval on to JAC.
Mr. Chairman, follow up. That is very encouraging to hear. If it comes from the governor, that's important. So, thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Senator Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Water Development Account 2, we won't go through all the detail again, same process. But when we get down to the bottom, the estimated 2-year number balance available for appropriation in Water Development Account 2 is $16,358,935. And again, conceptually, we would think about splitting that in half for 27 and 28. And Mr. Chairman, on to Water Development Account 3. This is on PDF page 10. Again, the balance available for appropriation, the 2-year number, $55,606,610. Mr. Chairman, I'll pause there. If there are any questions, when you're ready, I'll move on to the O&M accounts.
Are there any questions? Hearing none. David.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So annually, and this is on PDF page 12 in your e-notebook, annually, you're charged with reviewing the reservoir O&M accounts to determine if there's any condition where we might need to transfer funds from one account, like say Buffalo Bill, to another to cover any large obligation of O&M in one of the other reservoir accounts. So that's what this review is. It starts on page 12 with this memo, and it identifies the reservoir accounts that are part of this review. I'll just quickly go through that list. Fontenelle Reservoir, Buffalo Bill Dam, Palisades Reservoir. There's a miscellaneous water investment account, which historically covered the annual O&M for Seminole Reservoir. However, due to a legislation change a couple of years ago, that's no longer in there. But eventually, I believe in, is it 2030, Director Mead, will be having an O&M requirement for Park Reservoir. So that's out of that miscellaneous water investment account. Keyhole Reservoir account, although we don't have a projection there or an account that we have currently a balance in. High Savory Reservoir, Pathfinder, Glendo Reservoir, Lake DeSmet Reservoir, and Middle Piney Reservoir. Then when we move on to, well, I'll just go to the next page in the PDF here first. This has got our conclusions and recommendations. I'll just summarize these at the moment. When we completed this analysis, we have no recommended transfers or actions this year. All accounts were stable, and we didn't have any large commitments coming up that we needed to account for. So no action requested at this time. If we move over to page 14, just for your reference and historical purposes here, there's a background of each account, each O&M account, and it identifies the legislation that authorized that account. If there was an original appropriation that seeded that account, it also talks about what the typical expenditures or revenue are in that account. So there's a reference point in there if you're interested in any one of those specific reservoirs. Next, I will, just as an example, move over to PDF page 17. So what we did for each one of these reservoir accounts was prepare a 10-year projection, an estimate of what we think the account balance may look like in 10 years. In order to do that, we take historical averages, typically about a 10-year average of what the prior expenses and revenue were, to give us those numbers to project out. For those expenditures, like the operations and maintenance annual obligations, we also apply an inflation factor, which post-COVID, we've been at about 5%. Again, that's kind of trying to use like a historical average. We try not to chase, an individual year. So some years inflation might be really high, some years it might be really low. We don't try to overreact to what each year is. but to use a historical average. So we've been using 5-year or a 5% multiplier for those O&M charges. We also use, for the investment earnings projection, we use the State Treasurer's Office quarterly report from May, in this case, May of 25. And we use their 5-year average rate of return for the state agency pool, which I think this year was like 1.7%. I'll tell you, the last couple of years, the Treasurer's Office has been outperforming that by quite a bit. But again, we try not to chase like an individual year and use a historical average instead. So for each one of these accounts, and we're looking at Fontenelle as an example here, there's a transaction history of the last 10 years. So that's starting at fiscal year 2016 or July 1 of 2015. And you'll see in here specific revenue that was collected, expenditures that occurred. So there's 10 years of actual history. And that goes down through, I think, page 18 in your PDF. Ending at June 30th, 25, there's a balance there for Fontenelle of $5,409,596.60. Then we get to the projection section. And that's where I was saying we use those historical averages to project out 10 years what we think we would receive or spend based on prior history. So when we get to the end of that projection, we're estimating in 10 years, the balance would be $4,919,297,000. So just a little bit less than where we're at now. So we would consider that stable. If you look down below that, there are any notes about the account, potential future uses, and a conclusion. So the conclusion in the case of Fontenelle here, fund is stable, no excess funds available at this time. And there's this exact same scenario for each one of those reservoir accounts. I won't belabor you with those, but I'll pause here. If anyone has any questions about the process or a specific account, we can dig into that.
Anyone have any questions for David?
Mr. Chairman, I was just, can you expand upon not having an account for Keyhole a little bit?
So, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Hosey, we basically don't have any water in Keyhole at this point. So hence no need for an O&M account to pay for any Bureau of Reclamation O&M charges. So it was set up originally thinking we might have some water in eventually, but that never came to fruition. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions or anyone who's interested in having David go through all of these individually? Senator Bonner.
Not quite, Mr. Chairman, but, want to touch on Buffalo Bill since we're accustomed to seeing those expenditures in the legislature. You just go in a little bit more detail how you projected what those expenditures are moving forward. It seems like it's it varies quite a bit, and just a little bit more discussion as to how you came up with the numbers. Looks like you had a flat 4 million, a couple of years, 1.5 million, another 1 million, just a little bit more detail there.
Mr. Chairman, I can handle that if you'd like. So Buffalo Bill has had a pretty healthy balance over the years because of that WAPA loan repayment. Back in I believe it was the 80s, we worked with the Bureau of Reclamation to enlarge Buffalo Bill Dam. And as part of that, we worked with WAPA to put hydropower on the dam as well and do some upgrades to that. So as part of the funding of that, we were allowed to loan money to WAPA. They weren't allowed to pay it off early. So that's been a good investment for us getting back those funds. So that's where you see the remainder of the WAPA revenue on the left side there, 12 million, roughly 500,000. So we've used Buffalo Bill in some years as kind of a budget balancer, where if we have a lot of good projects that we would like to try to fund, we have transferred some funding here and there to account 1 or account 2 to try to fund projects. This is also an account that we foresee in the future when we need to enlarge. And when I say enlarge Fontenelle Reservoir, I don't mean a physical enlargement of the dam, like a raise of the dam. When they built Fontenelle Reservoir, they didn't riprap the entire front face of that. So not all of it's protected against wave action. So if they draw that reservoir down, eventually we'll need to put more riprap on the face of that dam. back in 2018 or 19, if I remember right, we did a study looking at what that might cost or different ways to utilize or go under contract with the Bureau of Reclamation for the water that's not currently under contract. And at the time, I think we estimated it was going to be a $13 or $16 million project. I don't remember off the top of my head, but when we get to that point, the intent is to probably need to use some money from Buffalo Bill Reservoir to fund that riprapping of Fontenelle Dam. So those are the 4 and 5 millions. High Savory you see on there, again, we kind of see this as one of our accounts where we've got that healthy balance. So in the future, for High Savory Reservoir, as that O&M account continues to draw down, then we'll want to refill that from Buffalo Bill account. So it's really for all of our reservoir O&M accounts, we're going to have basically commitments in perpetuity, where as long as those reservoirs are going to last, and O&M is just going to keep going up. So Buffalo Bill is kind of our saving grace in looking forward to the future to try to reimburse those accounts as we need to.
Other questions? Director, I'd like to address the Buffalo Bill issue just briefly. So if I read that correctly, that WAPA loan will mature in 2030, and there will be no more WAPA income at that time. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So it appears to me then most likely that if we don't use that money for Fontenelle between now and 2030, we may not have as available funds from Buffalo Bill to do the Fontenelle riprap. Would you agree, or would you address that maybe?
Mr. Chairman, the only reason we wouldn't have funds there is if somebody raided the Buffalo Bill account, or we chose to use that, these two bodies chose to use that to fund our normal projects, and that balance were to be drawn down before we actually got to the riprap project. Otherwise, the funding will sit there and continue to draw interest through the treasurer's office, and that fund or that account, Buffalo Bill account, will continue to grow. So just because we don't have, it won't grow as fast, of course, because we won't have that $2.5 million WAPA payment coming in every year, but we would still have the interest on the account every year.
So ever since I've been on this commission, there's been ongoing discussion about riprap on Fontenelle. And I'm assuming that the reason it hasn't happened is they have not drawn that down to where it was necessary. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. When we looked at that study, we looked at a couple of different ways of riprapping the front face. One of them was taking barges out there in a clamshell bucket on the barge and just dropping material through the water, and, which doesn't sound very efficient. The other one was draining the reservoir, which has quite a few environmental impacts to drain that now. And then the idea came up, let's just wait until we actually draw the reservoir down and then place riprap. So we're currently working through negotiations and technical meetings with the Bureau of Reclamation to understand how much additional water, because we've got 120,000 acre feet of contract water right now, the state of Wyoming does, in Fontenelle. There's up to an additional 145,000, but because of their normal operations and sediment and winter flows, they're looking into all that to understand exactly how much additional water they can contract for. And then we'll need to go through a public negotiation process with them, and then also the NEPA process to disclose all the environmental impacts. Once that's all done, then we could probably start stockpiling riprap, so it's ready when we actually go to draw it down someday.
So in my mind, the question becomes, how important is the riprap if for the life of the reservoir to date, it has not been drawn down enough to be necessary?
So when we did, Mr. Chairman, when we did the risk analysis with the Bureau of the Reclamation, they said that we could draw the reservoir down for a year, and any wave action that we might get on the reservoir that year would be, yes, it would cause some erosion, but it wouldn't be detrimental to the dam integrity and all that stuff. So we would have to fix any type of erosion that occurred and then riprap it. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but yes, they have not drawn it down, but in the long run, once we do draw it down, we will have to riprap it to be able to continue to use that water if we have to use it for multiple years.
Well, it's like we're playing a waiting game to see when it might happen, if it ever happens. And in the meantime, we're kind of encumbering some funds that might be able to be used elsewhere. Not that I'm not that I am in favor of spending or savings. Don't misunderstand me on that at all. I'm just kind of the mind, if there's a project that we think should be done, maybe we should be looking at seeing if that could be expedited, if it's necessary. That's my biggest question, is how necessary would the riprap actually be on Fontenelle? If it's necessary, I have no argument against going ahead and, saving the money and using it when that time comes. But if it's not necessary, I guess that's the big question. Has that been really discussed?
Mr. Chairman, it's really an active discussion. It is necessary. The active part of the discussion is really how much water the state of Wyoming is going to be able to contract for some of those reasons I mentioned. And also knowing that some of the operations, there's been sediment that's accumulated around kind of the rim of the reservoir as you go down. And icing concerns on the outlet works, for example, if you draw it too far down and the ice is sitting right on the gates and things like that. So they as in the Bureau want to have more or less a minimum pool to protect against some of those things. And they're still working with their operations division to understand exactly, make sure they're not missing anything. So that could change the amount of water that we either contract for, which would then change how far down we have to take the riprap. Or what I've been trying to negotiate the whole time is, hey, the Bureau needs a minimum pool. That wasn't contemplated at the beginning, so maybe the Bureau would be interested in paying for some of that riprap. So still negotiation. We will need it. We just don't know exactly how far down and what it's going to cost, because that study we did was now, 5-6 years ago. And that riprap's not a close source. So it's like going up to Atlantic City, I think was one of the spots we had to go to. So, yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for the director or for David on that issue? Okay.
Thanks, David. All right. Our next topic on the workshop agenda will be level 2 well drilling process updates. And I'd invite Georgia Mosier, our local PE or PG, I'm sorry, didn't mean to offend you, professional geologist.
Mr. Chair.
George?
So today for the commission's thoughts and discussions is a conversation about the level 2 or planning project well drilling process. We're handing out a one-page sheet of paper there, and the idea isn't necessarily to focus on that one-page sheet of paper. You can reference back to it later if it's helpful. I'm planning on just going through those items to help everybody understand them. And then that also should help folks online understand they're not really missing a whole lot. It's just a reference sheet of paper. So conceptually, what I wanted to talk about today was the way that the water development program has historically done level 2 well drilling projects. And then as a result of some conversations, not only, the commission with the office during meetings like this, but also internally, Jason and I have been doing a lot of talking about how we can structure level 2 projects in the future. And this is in response to the observation that we've had a number of level 2 well drilling projects that kind of fail to make make it across the finish line to level 3 projects. Sometimes we end up with a well that's drilled during these projects that sits idle for a little while, or we just ultimately have some struggles moving those forward and getting those incorporated into a sponsor's system. So historically, what you'll see kind of on this sheet is I've broken this apart into 2 major categories. We've got the historic process and then process moving forward into the future. What I want you to keep in mind is that this historic process, just because of the history of the agency and the way that water development program kind of started and moved forward over time, this was really a process that was driven predominantly by the geology, right? This was an attempt to go and look at, investigate geology, investigate productive aquifers, try to find, prolific sources of water and try to find good drinking water for mostly these municipal or improvement and service district systems. So as you'll see in the bullet list here, I've kind of just put a bullet list that was broadly in order how the scope of work was designed for those projects. We would start with a basic well siting study, big picture hydrogeologic kind of investigation, back of the envelope, pick out a couple of dots, and then do a little bit of study on where would well drilling proceed, what would well depths be. Generally speaking, then the consultant would put together bid specifications, hire a contractor to do some exploration work, and do some production testing on that aquifer. It was after that that the program would really, based on the success in the testing of those wells, develop, here's what the piping arrangement, transmission pipeline would look like. Here would be the costs associated with those things, start to size out that. And ultimately, those things would inform what the sponsor's financing plan might look like, and ultimate project costs. And what the office is planning to do for the future then is take some of those components and reorganize them to some degree. One of the things that I'm sure some folks remember is a discussion about some idle wells that were, they were 40 miles west of a sponsor, and the quote that came up was, well, why the heck didn't we look at how much it was going to cost before we drilled those wells? So we are going to be structuring that so that we do a little bit more of that estimating, cost analysis, potential funding sources, that sort of stuff, as a phase one of a phase two project, right? So we're gonna think about breaking these well drilling projects into 2 phases. Phase one would incorporate that back of the envelope. Let's pick out some places, think about what those costs would be, develop financing scenarios, and try to make a reasonably informed guess of what the costs to the sponsor are going to be, what the cost to the commission would be if that proceeds forward. Also, one of the things that we are thinking with this phase one is it would be good to get an idea of what constitutes success, right? If we have a good plan going into the well drilling program that, for instance, a sponsor really needs 500 gallons a minute, and we ultimately do a level or a phase two project and we find 100 gallons a minute, it makes it a lot easier to make decisions about that project. Then we're not left in, kind of this limbo of, well, is 100 good enough? Is it not good enough? And it makes it, quite frankly, easier to administer the project. While you've got a drilling contractor on board, you're more equipped to make decisions about whether you've got a successful well, whether it's something to move forward with, or whether it's time to plug and abandon a facility and maybe think about a different phase two that evaluates a different location. One of the interesting things about splitting it into a phase one and a phase two is that the operating criteria for the commission right now contemplates the idea that the commission will evaluate phase one investigations and will consider the sponsor's need for the project, interest in the project, and willingness and ability to financially participate in the project and determine whether it should move to phase two of a level two. That backbone within the operating criteria is a really good way to have a project milestone. If we go forward with a phase one of a level two, that means a sponsor has a good idea what they might be in for, and they can find themselves back in front of the commission asking for, we would like to move forward with phase two. And whether that means that they would amend potentially their existing level two legislation, maybe they're asking for a brand new project. I don't know that big picture that matters too much, but I do like the idea that the sponsor is back, fully knowledgeable about what success would look like for drilling a well and what costs they would ultimately be on the hook for reimbursing the commission for if we find a successful well. So obviously, breaking it apart into two phases, it requires that middle step of the sponsor coming back, asking for permission to proceed forward with an ultimate production size well and production size casing and testing. That would require some project specific authorization and legislative authorization, right? That'll be really a lot of the money for the well drilling project in many of these cases. So that'll be an additional funding request ask, and gives you guys a chance to really look at the phase one results and that report and say, we either think this seems like a feasible idea or we don't, and whether the sponsor is fully cognizant of what that looks like. So phase two in that case would consist of some of the same pieces that are in our existing process, just kind of toward the end, right? That's bid specifications, drilling a well, ultimately doing aquifer testing, and then coming out with a report of findings and level 3 cost estimates that help move that into the construction program. I guess that's the bulk of what we were intending on presenting today to you guys for any thoughts or consideration. Just, I guess, once again, to reiterate the big picture on it, the historic program was really one driven by geology and hydrogeology. And what we are attempting to do with the future of this is make it something that is more fiscally focused, right? This is more about the dollars and making sure that everybody understands the costs before we would move forward with it. Mr. Chair, I'd stand for any questions or discussion the commission would like to have.
Thank you, George. Are there any questions? John?
That one, okay. So you have legislative authorization. We don't need anything different now to switch to this future process. We can do that within the rules we're in. You're talking about legislative authorization after the project is underway, correct?
Mr. Chair, yeah, we don't require any changes right now to operating criteria or any changes to legislation. To be clear, the legislative authorization that I'm thinking about there is just to authorize basically additional dollars in a future phase of study under that project.
Thank you.
And if I might reiterate a little bit, it's also a way of not, under the old process, we would include all of the costs for a level 2 well drilling project as an encumbrance for the project. So we might end up with 1.5 or $2 million that's encumbered for a long period of time. Under this new program, we would likely, under phase 1, it would be significantly lower cost, and make sure that everybody's on board before we go encumbering the additional dollars that it would take for production size casing testing.
Other questions for George? George, I want to just kind of make sure I understand. Essentially, I won't say all you're trying to do, but essentially what you are hoping to achieve here is probably to have, anytime we drill a well, if it's a productive well, knowing that it will be moved forward and the sponsor will take ownership, rather than the commission having some liability for, say, an abandoned well or something to that effect. Is that correct?
That's exactly what we're trying to target here, yes.
Okay, thank you. So as with what Representative Eklund asked, Chairman Eklund asked, I feel kind of compelled to ask a similar question. It requires no action on the commission's part either. Is that correct?
Not at this point, sir. But what I do want to make clear is that, in the old process, we might have a sponsor that would apply for a level 2 well drilling project, and you would see that sponsor, at the very beginning after they file an application, sponsor would come in front of the commission and ask for funding for a project, and we would move forward. Under the new process, you're likely to see that sponsor twice. Once at the phase 1 where they ask for, help and assistance in identifying a source for water supply. And then assuming that we make it through this phase one and the sponsor says, heck yeah, that sounds like a good idea to us, you are likely to hear from them again in their request for additional funds to go after that exploration effort.
But as far as, we don't need to amend our criteria or anything to that regard. I would assume there would be something, maybe an informational packet that the office would put together then to a projective or prospective sponsor that then they would understand this isn't going to be a one-step process anymore.
That's accurate, Mr. Chair. Yep.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, George.
Mr. Moore?
Another question? Okay. Thanks, George. Director?
All right, Mr. Chairman, our next agenda item, Bill Brewer, our Deputy Director of Construction, is going to give you an update on the Levitt Reservoir construction project. This is the one, I think we were in Cody a few years ago. We were discussing whether or not to fund it. We had bids in hand. Anyway, the decision was to move forward, and I think we're in year 3, I believe. 2, maybe 2.5. I can't remember. We started late that one year. Okay. So he's going to show you some pictures. It's really just informative to show you how the progress of that is going.
Welcome, Bill.
Chairman, Commission, Select Water members, Bill Brewer, Deputy Director of Construction. As Jason mentioned, this project was bid the summer of 23, awarded about August of 23. Through that first winter of 23-24, we started putting together all the materials to build the dam. There's 2 huge borrow areas. And then actually started construction spring of 24. So we're about 1.5 years into construction, about 2 years since the project was awarded. So, Katie? So this is kind of an overview, both a schematic drawing. You can see the dam down towards the lower part of the area, the big gray spot. Air photo fairly well lines up with that. So the big kind of dark brown area you can see there in the middle is the actual dam in construction. And then to the far north of where you see the dam, you also see another kind of gray area. That's the wetlands. We're required to build a replacement wetlands because there was a reservoir here. So that's supplemental wetlands for, and that's essentially where most of the water for the reservoir actually comes into the project. It's kind of hard to see. And to the far left of that, or far right, I'm sorry, is where the actual inlet. So the stream valley you can see on the right side of the screen is where the water comes from. The actual reservoir is in a relatively dry valley next to the stream. We generally can't build reservoirs within streams anymore. So it's on a side channel reservoir. Okay.
There, just to help everybody.
See if I can get that far. Okay. So up in this upper corner is about where the inlet to the reservoir is. And then the pipeline comes down through here, comes up here and dumps across this wetlands up here and then flows down. The original reservoir dam was here with the water. You can kind of see the water there. And then the new reservoir's footprint will be considerably larger. Okay, Katie, you want to go next? So we'll start out by talking about the borrow areas. So there was 3 main borrow areas for the materials to build the dam. There's the east terrace, the west terrace, and then essentially within the reservoir footprint, we're removing most of the clay for the actual clay core of the dam is coming out of the reservoir footprint. So it serves 2 purposes. One, it's materials we're not paying somebody else for because we own that land. Secondly, it also makes the reservoir larger so we get more storage. So next slide. So here's about 6 months into procurement of materials. So this is, over here is the East Barrow area. They're actively still mining this at this point. This was the West Barrow area at this point last April. We had finished getting all the materials out of there. That was all stockpiled, ready to start building the dam with. So next slide. And then one of the other areas we borrowed materials is, this was the old dam and this was the footprint of the old dam. The dam had been breached about 2 years before we started construction to allow that old area to dry out. It dried out considerably. It also had about 2 foot of a crusty material and then swamp muck under that. So the contractor still had to fight quite a bit of water. But essentially everything that came out of the footprint of the old reservoir was a very silty, high organics material. That all went straight up to the wetlands and became the wetlands topsoil for the new wetlands area. So horrible material for any other type of construction, great material for building a wetlands with. Okay, next slide. And then the last part was the old dam itself is right here being excavated out. And that was pretty good material that actually went upstream and went back into the new dam. But we needed to make sure we had a clear flow path below the dam. So the old dam needed to be removed. Not 100%, but partially removed.
Just one quick thing. So the original dam stored about 650 acre feet. The new dam's going to store about 6,500 acre feet, just as information.
Yep. So 10 times the storage we're looking at. Okay, next slide. So now we'll talk a little bit more about the actual dam here. And then up through here is the east embankment. So if the dam gets close to full, there's the potential for like wave action and stuff to slide some water over to this other valley. So there's basically an embankment here. The dam has been in construction since last April. The east embankment was actually started last week. So I went up hoping to see some of that east embankment being constructed. It started on Monday, so actually yesterday. So I missed getting to see that at this point. So next slide. So again, kind of see here, this is the dam. In the aerial photo, you can see that constructed here. The far, I guess it's kind of east, northeast side is fairly close to full grade at this point. The very west side down here is basically still at bedrock. They just cleared it to bedrock within the last couple of weeks. In the very, very far end, they're actually still excavating some of that material out to clear it up. So the dam is progressing from the from the east to the west. So the east is almost at full height. The west hasn't even been started. So we've moved a lot of dirt. We've made a lot of progress, but we still got a bit to do between now and December because we're supposed to be storing water in the spring. So next slide. So this is just kind of a little bit of progression. So this is May of 23. This was actually the pre-bid walkthrough showing the contractors the area. This is not quite a year later with the contractor mowed in and just starting to strip topsoil and getting things ready. Next slide. So June of last year, we're starting to get a little bit of a dam showing up. November, when they shut down operations, we had a pretty good footprint. So this is the downslope toe of the dam. This would be the upslope toe of the dam over here. And just starting to come up on the full height of the dam. Next slide, Katie. So essentially, this photo is very similar to the November photo. It's in the spring when they just started going again. And then this is last week. So if you look at the tower, you can see about that level where the platform is there is about where we're filled to now. And like I say, this end of the reservoir is fairly close. I think it comes up to that 1 mark there. And this is the release tower. So this is, there's a couple better photos later on that will show you where this is where the water actually releases from the reservoir. So there's The high water outlet is up here. You can see that's if we're basically getting ready to overflow. The main gates that we control with are on the other side that we can't see from here. And if you can see this little bit of a bump out there, eventually that's where the bridge will be, and the bridge will run back to the top of the dam. So the tower is actually out into the water a little bit, and there'll be a bridge across from the top of the dam over to that. So, okay, next slide. So this is kind of a cross section of what the dam looks like. This center section right here, this 4A, little trapezoidal section, that's actually the clay core. That's what holds all the water in the reservoir. Behind it is this various sand layers that if any water gets through the dam, we want to pick up that water and get it controlled out of the dam so we don't cause any erosion. And essentially the rest of the dam is weight to hold it in place. So when the water is there, it doesn't push this down slope. On the east side, this is relatively narrow for a dam. As we go west, it gets wider because there's a mudstone that doesn't support the dam as well. So the dam had to get bigger to have enough weight to actually hold it in place. So next slide. So you can kind of see some of those layers here. This very light tan is a coarser sand. The red sand here is a very, very fine sand. And then this kind of purplish maroon material behind it is the clay that we talked about. And you can kind of see that here. And then this is from the other end of the dam. This is last week looking. So this is that clay core with these sand layers. So on this side, upstream is over here with these, and downstream is over here. We're looking at the other way. So downstream is over here and upstream is over here with the tower there. So that's the various layers. It's a fairly wide dam on the one side because the subgrade wasn't ideal. And it's a very wide valley here. Unlike some of our other reservoirs, this is a pretty wide valley. So it's a pretty long reservoir or dam for some. Okay, next slide, please. So this is the control tower, the outlet tower. So last April, they had excavated down to bedrock and poured a concrete pad on top of that bedrock, and we're starting the foundation of the tower. So at that time, there's the crane's here. You can see the crane here. You can't even see the tower yet. Next slide. Oh, you went to. So this is not quite 2 months later. That area you see formed up was here. And now we're actually building part of the tower. And right here is the low water intake. You can't quite see the pipe there. But that pipe runs this way. And that's what we would use if we were actually going to drain the reservoir. Essentially, we should never probably drain the reservoir unless we're doing maintenance, like a 50-year maintenance. This should keep a dead pool for recreation and other uses besides the irrigation water. Next slide. So this is November last year. That pipeline I was talking about is below ground here, and this is its opening, and this would be what was used to drain the reservoir if we were going to drain the reservoir. And then there's 2 outlets that you can see here, one here and one high water. They can use those 2 different, assuming the water's full, they can control the water coming out of the reservoir and control the temperature of the water. That helps the downstream stream and fish have the right temperature of water if they choose, or if the water's lower, then they can just use the lower gate. And then, like say on the other side, you can't see from here, it's on this side is that high water outlet. Okay, next slide. So this is March this year. The tower is essentially done. Eventually, once the dam is going along, there'll be like a little control building up here to actually control the valves. It's not much. Everything on this structure is manually controlled. The irrigation district did not want a lot of automated. So we've got some cranes and stuff like that, but it's mostly manually operated. That was to help cut costs a little bit when we were looking at being overpriced. And they also were worried about future maintenance costs, that they were used to using manually open gates, and they're like, well, just keep the costs down and keep future maintenance down by going manual. And then, like I said, that bridge will eventually come from here over to the tower. And like I say, on this picture, you can kind of see this working platform down here. And if you look at the next picture, so next slide, and by now we're filled up to that level. And then this is downstream. So essentially at this portion of the dam, we're very close to done on this slope is done. Up here, the dam will continue to rise, but the tower itself is pretty much buried as much as it will be. And it'll be out in the water once the water is raised, and then you'll take that bridge to get out to control the gates. Okay, next slide. Okay, so backing off from the actual reservoir, now we're looking at the inlet structure to fill the reservoir, which is over here. Like I say, Beaver Creek comes down through here. So it fills off of Beaver Creek, and then it runs a pipeline over here, which dumps into the wetlands here. And then there's a little cutoff pipeline right there that you can kind of see in red. If for some reason we're doing maintenance on those wetlands, for some reason we don't want to put water in the wetlands, but we want to put water in the reservoir, we can bypass the wetlands and put water straight in the reservoir. But most of the time we should be running the water into the wetlands, running across the wetlands, and then it dumps into the reservoir. And that helps take out any sediments we may have, keeps that wetlands working, and delivers pretty clean, clear water into the reservoir. Okay, next slide. So this was November last year, getting ready to build the inlet diversion structure. So you can see the end of the pipeline here in both these photos. So this is actually the diversion structure where the water would be taken out of the stream. The stream will be running here. So in this photo, it's running parallel to that rebar. In this photo, it's running across the rebar. This is the weir wall right here. So next slide. And this is what it looks like finished. This is last week. So that diversion pipeline is over here. This is an air vent for that pipeline. So the water comes down the stream. At this point where the water's too low to run over the weir, it cuts through the trash rack and goes out a gate right about there, which is that here on this slide. And the active stream is running down here at the moment. This looks very large compared to the string. However, in the spring when it was flowing, it was coming over the high weir wall. So not only was it coming over the weir structure here, it was coming over the higher wall. I believe for about a week it flowed enough to come over the higher wall. So the structure actually is the size it needs to be. The landowner was a little concerned because it looks a lot bigger than they thought it looked on the plans. However, that also explains why we bought as much land from them as we did to build this structure. So basically everything there is physically built and operational. What we don't have at this point is some of the electronic controls, monitoring equipment that the SEO's office needs to monitor the water to make their determinations, and some things to let the district know. Again, this doesn't show up real good in the photo, but there's a manual gate right here. And this is again operated manually because the district decided to keep the costs lower on the construction and keep their future maintenance costs lower by not having to bring electricity out here. The electric controls we need can be ran by solar. So it kind of cut down the costs and tried to keep this project a little reasonable. Okay, next slides. So this is that inlet pipeline. There's not much to show on a pipeline. Once they're done, it's just dirt. But you can see the pipeline here. It's bedded here on building. And then this is the outlet structure. So, we're 3/4 of a mile away from that inlet, and this is where the water dumps out into a riprap and goes into a canal here that feeds the wetlands. Okay, next slide. And looking the opposite direction, this is that riprap we were just looking at, and the canal going out. This soil here, it's hard to see here, but inside over here, all this soil is at its final grade. There is a rim of soil going around. Right now, there's a little kind of a 2-track road going around as they're finishing construction. This soil will be eventually pushed over that 2-track road so that it's all topsoiled outside of the canal area. Next slide. This part of the canal over here is not constructed yet, but this is what one of the outlets looks like. There's 3 outlets coming around a curve of those wetlands, and they can control the water. So if one part of the wetlands isn't getting enough water, they can close down one gate, open up another gate, and keep the water flowing. So the idea eventually is to get it where it flows evenly across the wetlands, but they do have some manual control to adjust things to make sure the wetlands stay wet and producing lots of cattails and stuff that we're supposed to produce in the future. And then, so all 3 of these look essentially the same, and the canal hasn't been rebuilt, so there will be eventually dirt canal built on either side of this to finish this off. This is that bypass outline pipeline. So the pipeline comes in here, goes into control structure here, which will eventually have a valve. So if for some reason they need to bypass the wetlands and get water to the reservoir, we can bypass it through this pipeline. So, okay, next slide. This is kind of a long view of the wetlands. It's kind of hard to see. There's not much to see here, but basically it's just a topsoiled area that will be seeded in eventually with various wetlands plants, primarily cattails, to replace the wetlands that were disturbed by removing the old reservoir. Okay, next slide. Okay, in the last section, we'll talk about up here at the reservoir. So we're back here looking at the dam. This is the air photo looking at the dam. This is the outlet pipeline. And primarily the outlet pipeline brings the water out and dumps it back into Beaver Creek. So we took it out of Beaver Creek over here, brought it over, put it in the reservoir and stored it. And then we'll bring it out of the reservoir, put it back in Beaver Creek, and it'll go downstream for the irrigators to use. There is a small pipeline that cuts across over here, and that's to replace the little bit of water from this drainage that we're basically damming up, to replace, and that's this unnamed tributary. So we dump water back into this unnamed tributary to keep its wetlands operational after the reservoir is done, and it eventually flows down and ties back into Beaver Creek about 3/4 of a mile downstream from the dam. Okay, so that's pretty much everything at the actual dam site. And I guess, sorry, so this is this is the actual pipeline, outlet pipeline. This is a fiberglass reinforced pipeline coming out that they're building here. That goes under the road. The road is currently the road will eventually run through about where the excavator is sitting there. It's been moved over temporarily while they finish this pipeline. And then the pipeline will eventually dump out up here, and there'll be a drop structure that brings it down. The stream is also temporarily bypassed. The stream should be up here a little farther. So the stream will be reformed back to its original drainage. There'll be a drop structure here that drops the water down and slows it down before it hits the stream, so we don't cause erosion. And then all of this will be remediated back and made look nice again. Right now it looks pretty tore up. And again, the landowner was a little concerned that it looks worse than it will be. But they've been good to work with, understanding that they kind of trust us that we'll get it back looking the way it's supposed to be when we get done. Unfortunately, almost everything is still tore up now. They see very little in this area that's actually been remediated and back to grass. So they trust us, but they question us. Okay. So that's pretty much everything at the actual dam site and everything related to the actual reservoir. I can't remember. Do you remember how many miles downstream it is for the bypass? It's like 6.5 miles. So 6.5, 7 miles downstream from where we just talked that the water's going to dump into Beaver Creek. We take it back out of Beaver Creek again. There's a couple diversions up here for irrigators, but most of the water will be diverted back out of the stream at this point, put into a pipeline that runs down here, and then it eventually dumps into the Shell Canal and goes downstream for more irrigators. So there's several irrigators along this pipeline that will get water from the reservoir, and then also many more irrigators down the canal that will get water after we dump it back into the Shell Canal. That's already part of the irrigation district.
Yeah, I might just mention, Shell Canal is where the majority of the irrigated acres lie. And when you come down Beaver Creek, which kind of follows that red line, you then cross east-west wise Shell Creek. So you got to go through a low spot and come back up to get water into Shell Canal. So it's basically an inverted siphon to be able to use the reservoir water in Shell Canal.
Okay, so next slide. So this is the start of the diversion structure. When the contractor had the pile driving, so these are the sheet piles here, kind of hard to see them, but when they brought them in to build the sheet piling wall for the diversion structure for the dam, they also had them come down here. They did some pre-excavation here and did the pilings down here at the same time to have one mobilization for the sheet piling contractor, even knowing they knew they weren't going to actually get to building this for a while. So that's what it looked like in November of last year, was just a little bit of pre-excavation and sheet pilings. Next slide. So as of last week, they just started working on this again, and they've excavated that area in between those sheet pilings. So that's where the concrete floor of the diversion structure will be in the future, is that grade you're seeing right now. So really not much has changed there in 6-8 months, but this structure is just going to start getting built. Basically, last week, they just started working on it. So it'll be finished by this fall, but isn't quite there yet. And coming out of, you want to go back one? So basically the water will be diverted over here. The pipeline runs kind of along the slope here, which is an original canal. There was a small canal there. We're replacing that small canal with a slightly bigger pipeline, but it'll also become pressurized so that when we get to that low spot where Shell Canal is, we can actually push the water up and over the other side. Okay, next slide. So that diversion structure off screen was kind of over here. This is that kind of slope where I was looking at. So this was in March. They were lining up, getting ready to build this pipeline. In March, they had finished the portion. This is downstream of there. But they built all the pipeline that was in irrigated fields first over the winter so that they could irrigate this spring and get those fields back in use. And then we built the non-irrigated areas. So we the pipeline was built in sections, but it was intentionally built in sections so that we kept disturbances to the ranchers as low as possible. So kind of you can see here, there's kind of a brown strip there where they had just replaced the topsoil there. And if we go to the next slide, that's that same section right there. So it's already back in grass and nice and green. Right in this area, we got a little bit of yellow grass. That's kind of the same yellow grass here. That was this manhole got put in kind of late. So this was still disturbed a little later than the rest of the field. So the rest of the field's recovered pretty quickly. This part of the field has not quite recovered yet, but that's the difference between March of having bare dirt and last week, July, we've got grass growing there already. So this rancher was pretty happy with the progress that his field recovered as quickly as it did. And that's pretty much, so that pipeline is still being finished up. It'll be finished up this fall, into the winter, a little bit into next year to finish that pipeline. The main portion of the dam will be finished up this fall and we'll have a partial fill in the spring. of 26. And then the dam will be finished up in spring of 26. Some of those gravel pits and stuff won't be finished completely being remediated until next fall, and then seeded late fall, early winter. And then 27, we should have a full fill on this reservoir. So, and hopefully December next year, the contractor should be off-site, and spring of 27, we should have full fill. And that has to be filled at 1 foot per day rate. So we'll have the engineers up there inspecting everything as we're filling that reservoir, making sure everything's functioning correctly. But hopefully this time next year when we're talking about this, we're pretty much done with this one. So I went through that fairly quickly, maybe not quickly enough. So any questions?
Any questions for Bill? Sure. Chairman Eklund.
Mr. Chairman. So you mentioned what the dam, how many acre feet the dam had previously and how much it'll have now, and I didn't get it written down quick enough.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Eklund, that was 650 acre feet before, and it was basically owned by a few individuals.
Okay.
Now for the Shell Valley Watershed Improvement District, it'll be 6,500 acre feet.
Mr. Chairman, that's huge. That is really going to be appreciated up there. What is the closest community or town that this is near?
So this is east of Grable, about 20 miles just north of Shell, Wyoming.
Thank you.
Yep.
Go ahead, Ron.
What's the capacity of the dead pool?
If I remember it, I think it's 1,500 acres, acre feet, sorry.
But you can access it.
Yes. Yeah, this is all public access. When we went through the permitting process, a portion of this is on BLM property, so we had to get a right-of-way permit. So it does have public access right next to the road.
Right. There will be a boat ramp and some basic facilities and stuff. None of that has been started yet. So I could have showed you a picture of like, this is where it'll be, but there's nothing there yet. So that's one of the last things they will be building is the boat ramp and the, I think there's a small compost type toilet facility and a couple picnic tables. They'll be there for the public to use.
Other questions?
Just one more time, how much does this project cost? Will cost?
Right now, active contracts were at, I think, 73 million. We have 80 million in funding. So we've got a 6 million something still available. My belief is we've had our last big contract change order because we're essentially the bedrock everywhere. Getting to bedrock was kind of the questionable thing of where, you know, we had an idea of where the bottom of the dam would be. However, until you get out there and actually open it up and see it, we're not sure. So we did go a little deeper in some areas, a little shallower in other areas. I'd say overall we went deeper than average. So we've got one small area left that we're digging out. I don't expect anything to be surprising there. So my guess is we should be pretty much done with any kind of a major contractor change order. We do have an engineer's change order that we're working on right now to bring them up. But I'm thinking we're probably looking about 5 million. Hopefully will be reverted at the end of this.
Mr. Chairman, just one more question. So what did the dam start out projected to cost, and how much have we inflation's reality, and so how much is inflation?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Cott, I think years ago when we were doing feasibility studies, it was around 41 million. And then with more geotechnical investigation and understanding this has mudstone, which was hard to deal with, that plus inflation and different things, the cost definitely went up. But
Somewhere.
the benefit cost ratio, which we always update as things change, was definitely positive. I don't remember exactly where it was, but I want to say it was 1.3 or 1.4 if my memory serves me. the benefits versus the cost over the lifespan of the reservoir. So it's definitely a good investment for those folks up there and the state of Wyoming, I would say.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have a question, Bill, on the fill. Will that be only seasonal during high flows, or will it be something that can be filled at any time?
It's generally seasonal when there's free water. However, Beaver Creek has considerable amount of free water available. So by this time of the year, you kind of saw where the water was last week. I kind of in that. At this point, there's no water available to fill. But I think they were saying right up until June, they could have been still trickling a little bit of water. But the projection is pretty good that this should fill annually, that there's plenty of free water on that stream. Do you remember anything different?
Yeah, we went through a lot of hydrologic modeling to understand, because this is a present day water right. So it's the last to fill, all the previous direct flow water rights take precedence. But I would imagine as people get used to having more storage here, that things could change where they're not calling the reservoir out. They might in the first few years thinking they need to get their water, but obviously it's better to store it and use it when you need it. So I imagine management will probably change in that drainage as they get familiar with how to operate it to the maximum benefit.
Their historical usage downstream has been less or greater than the storage on this reservoir, do you know?
Mr. Chairman, or Madam, sorry, Mr. Chairman, I'm reverting back to Lisa being chairman, having flashbacks to calling you Mr. Chairman. So maybe rephrase that question. I'm not sure if I.
Well, as far as it's not necessarily a concern, but more of an observation. We built a reservoir for storage, hopefully to satisfy late season irrigation needs. Nearly always have enough for high water. It's always afterwards, and that's why we like storage in Wyoming. But so the question what I'm kind of driving at is historical use of acre feet of water used in the past, let's say 10 years. Would it have been greater than the storage that will we draw this reservoir down every year, I guess is what I'm really getting at.
Mr. Chairman, yes. When we did, this is all based on purpose and need to be able to get something permitted through the federal government. So that was all looked at, what you would actually need for water to get through the full growing season. And, then looking for the buckets that could store that and have the yield with the watershed above it to be able to provide that. So yes, you're right. It's late season irrigation. I don't know that, every year is different, so they probably won't draw it down every year, but there's going to be years they draw it down. And the years they don't need to, they shouldn't, so they can have some carryover, because the next year might be a dry year. But they'll all get their existing rights. This is water above and beyond. Like you said, you're storing it in the spring when it's just kind of running by everybody, or you can't divert it yet because it's too cold running down to Montana. And we have right to develop more water in Wyoming, so that's what we're doing here.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
One more question on that. See if I can remember my question. Let's just hold that.
Thanks, Bill. Might as well just stay up here. All right.
Yep.
So our next agenda item is a sponsor contingency account request. And I might just be a bit repetitive for the folks that have been on the Select Water Committee and the Commission for a while, but for the new members, at least maybe on the Select Water Committee, I don't know if we had one of these back in May or not, but sponsor contingency fund, we have one set up in each one of our accounts for new development projects, for rehab projects, and then also our Account 3 Dam and Reservoir program. And basically what it is we go through the legislative process and set some money aside in each one of these accounts for sponsor contingency. And then if things come up during the year outside the session, such as what we're going to be hearing today, a bid comes in a little higher than we expected from the engineer's opinion of cost, we can analyze that, make sure it's a good use of the money, and basically jump on that bid and continue forward by coming back to these two bodies and getting that permission to do that. We don't have to delay the project and go back through the entire legislative process to get more funds appropriated in, and then inflation and rebidding and all that stuff. So it's really to be reactive to unforeseen bids, or during a project, if something comes up that was unforeseen, then we can react to that faster too. So just a little background, and I'll hand it over to Bill.
Okay.
And I think we're on page 35 or 36 for this in the e-notebook.
So Chairman, Commission, Select Water, Bill Brewer, Deputy Director of Construction again. So this project is a 2023 project. It was a pipeline. This was a regionalized system. We had two separate communities that essentially joined together to form kind of a regional system to save costs. So they both had individual pipelines coming down from the mountains. They were both wearing out. So the idea was to replace two pipelines with one pipeline and serve both communities. Along with that was added in a storage tank to make the system work a little more efficiently. This was set up kind of on our new style of they were given pre-construction funds to get this moving along at 67% grant. When we got to the construction, unfortunately, because of the way funding is right now, funding was dropped down to a 50-50 match for the construction portion of the work. And because the pipeline and the tank are nearly the same size projects and two totally different contractors would do that type of work, we usually find it more efficient, and the engineer also decided to split the project into two bids and bid the pipeline out separate. We also had some concerns. They had a large portion of ARPA funding on this, and we wanted to make sure we spent those federal funds and didn't lose those. So the pipeline was bid out last year. It came in over the engineer's original estimate. And unfortunately, we couldn't bid the tank for a little while because we had some Forest Service issues in getting the permit. So when we did bid this tank here last month, even knowing the cost came in a little under what the original engineer's estimate, because the pipeline was a little high, overall, the project's a little short on funds. So sponsor has requested sponsors contingency funds. This would be at a 50-50 match for the additional funds needed. It equates to about 5.3% of the total project for this increase. For what we've seen with sponsors contingency the last few years, that's actually fairly reasonable. Like I say, unfortunately, maybe if we'd played some games and tried to do something different on bidding the pipeline, maybe we could have gotten lower prices. Maybe we would have gotten higher prices. You know, hindsight's 2020. But in any case, where we're at, the office's recommendation is to do sponsors contingency for $365,000 to finish this project up. The sponsor would be responsible to find the additional funds to match that 50% grant and complete the project. And Jewel with the district is also here. That can also give you a brief statement on things.
First, I just want to say thank you to the commission for the previous funding that they have provided to help us with this water project. Bill has pretty much summed up what the project is all about. And in those two phases, the portion of the ARPA funding did not quite cover the bid that came in, which was a little higher than expected. And as he stated as well, the project for the tank itself came in right about where we expected, but it left us about $730 or $730,000 short of what we need to complete this project. So in order to continue to service the people of Osmond and provide better quality and the ability to provide more to the community of Osmond, we are requesting that we are able to get the funds needed to complete this project. And we would appreciate your consideration in helping us to get that done.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions for Bill or Jewel or the director?
What is your plans for the other 350,000 you'd have to come up with?
We have talked to the Bank of Star Valley, and they are willing to give us a loan for that amount. Looking at our financial records, they feel like that we, could pay back that money in a reasonable amount of time. We also feel like that once the system is up and running, that we will have a higher PSI. We will be able to produce more water. And once the system is completely tested, we will open that up to other people that are wanting to get on the water system at this time. And at that point, we will charge them a hookup fee, which right now we have set that amount at $20,000 for the hookup fees to the system. So that would help us to collect some of the funds needed as well.
Glad to hear you got a plan for that. Appreciate it.
Other questions?
Right here. Mark.
Commissioner Cott?
Just Director Mead and Osmond District, can you just explain just the relationship with Happy Valley and Osmond District one more time? And they're merged, is that correct? And is this project for the Osmond portion versus the Happy Valley? Just explain how that's all connecting together.
Okay, this project is a combination of the Happy Valley water system that became a district. And we were not a district. We merged with them, became one district, and we just chose to maintain the Osmond name. So it is a combination of both of them.
Just another comment. We really greatly appreciate Osmond and Happy Valley working together to form a district. Regionalization is one of our goals, and it's great to see that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? I do have a question for the director. When we put out these contracts like this, is there a percentage number that we normally shoot for the contingency portion? Or is it a number that the office determines, or how do we go about that?
Mr. Chairman, we don't have a set percentage if it's over a certain amount or under a certain amount, whether we bring it for contingency funds. We really just bring every one of them back to the commission. I would say, as an example, Levitt Reservoir, when we went from 41 million to 78 million, that was a big jump, obviously 50% or 200%, I guess. So that one, we took it back through the legislature. So we kind of just use our best judgment, explain the two different avenues of going about this. And if we do think it's, significantly more, 20, 30% more, is it worth going back to the legislature to be as transparent as possible? Or is it worth coming to the sponsor contingency request in front of the two bodies here? So
Maybe I need to restate that. I'm not sure it was very clear. I'm going to just throw out a scenario. Let's say we had a small project that was $1 million project. When it was bid, that's what the bid came in. And when we award that, normally every contract, we have some contingency attached to it.
Yeah.
That's the number I'm asking about. How do we determine what that contingency number is that goes with that contract?
So when we have an active bid,
Mhm.
or we go with 5% contingency.
5%.
So,
okay.
and that's what's built into this is a 5% contingency. So there's a good chance we won't use all this funding because there is that 5% contingency built in. Typically during design, like when we first bring a project to you, fresh, we start with about a 15% contingency. Because there's more variables, the design's not finished. But as we move along in the project, that contingency should keep coming down because we should be a little tighter and tighter on the final project. So usually we want about 10% when we go into bidding. And when we actually have a bid in hand, which we do in this case, we'll lower it down to about 5% of the project. So within this number is the overage plus 5% contingency to make sure we've got some room for some changed conditions.
Okay, thank you. That answers the question. So, Director, we'll take action on this on Thursday in the form of a motion.
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. We just wanted to have the conversation today to be as efficient with our time on Thursday as we could be.
Will there be any action necessary from select water?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Bill.
Okay, that takes us to the discussion portion. I think maybe we should take a 5-minute break. sometime today.
Yeah.
Okay, Director, I believe Director Mead is going to discuss the Goshen Irrigation District tunnel situation.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to point out real quick, I'll give a quick introduction here, but I believe we have Kevin Strecker. Okay, so we're going to be talking about the Goshen Irrigation District tunnels. Excuse me, tunnels. We got a request from Goshen Irrigation District just on clarification on how they could use the allocated funds from the state of Wyoming. So I do believe we have Kevin Strecker with the district and Senator Steinmetz, as well as some representatives, Marcus Kroll, I believe, from HDR, who's the engineer completing the design on behalf of the district. So just maybe a quick reminder of those who haven't been involved in this. Of course, I think everybody knows the failure of the Tunnel 2 at Goshen Irrigation District a number of years ago. They've been working on what the best way to fix that was over the years, have a path forward. I think the current design estimate to complete the project is around $150 million, and I'm going to use round numbers. That would include both replacement of Tunnel 2 and Tunnel 1. These are consecutive tunnels along their canal. They both have issues. Tunnel 1 just never collapsed in the first place, but they were both shored up after the initial collapse of Tunnel 2. So the funding that's been set up right now for the project, as a reminder, this takes water to not only Wyoming lands, Goshen Irrigation District, but also Nebraska lands gearing Fort Laramie Canal in Nebraska. So the breakdown of costs when any work is done on either one of these tunnels is 49% is the responsibility of Wyoming side and 51% is the responsibility of Nebraska side. So currently, Wyoming has set aside through legislative actions from the Legislative Stabilization Reserve account approximately $42 million, just a hair less. And Nebraska, I think, has set aside through ARPA funds roughly $24 million. And then both sides have approached the Bureau of Reclamation for an XM loan. And I believe they have approval for a $58.5 million loan, or roughly $59 million. That leaves a shortfall for the overall project cost of 151. Well, in their letter, they said $151 million. So Goshen's share would be about $74 million, or roughly half of that number. And then if you think about it as in two tunnels, I don't know if these are exactly accurate numbers, but roughly $37 million per tunnel to get to the Wyoming's $74 million portion. A lot of numbers there. So back in May, we had HDR and the district give an update on how that was going, if you recall. And as part of that discussion, I said the office's way that we were approaching it with the state funding was we were basically going to prorate the money out. So if Tunnel 2 cost 50% of the 151 million and Tunnel 1 was 50%, we'd allow them to use 50% of the state money on one tunnel and 50% on the other tunnel. And I think everybody thought, yep, that was a good idea. Since this time, or since the May, I think we've learned, or the district has learned, if they, they've got quite a few irons in the fire looking for other funding sources besides drawing on a loan from the Bureau of Reclamation. I'll let Kevin talk about that in a second. And then two, when they start drawing on that Bureau of Reclamation XM loan, interest starts accruing immediately on the funds that they draw. And, they're not interested in that obviously either. And we want to consider that as well. So what they've asked for is to use the state funds upfront in their full amount before they start drawing on a loan. which would allow them to continue to look for additional grant dollars in other places, such as the federal government. But then also avoiding that interest on a loan. If they do have to start drawing on that, it would be a couple years from now potentially instead of right away. So they'd have less interest. So when they brought this letter to us late last week, I had our attorney kind of look in to make sure, we were on solid ground. We looked back at the legislation, statutes associated with it. There's nothing in there that says it has to be prorated. That was just our thought in the office, trying to be responsible with the funds, knowing that the intent of the legislation is to complete the entire projects, which is Tunnel 2 and Tunnel 1. And I say them in that order because Tunnel 2 is going to be replaced first. And then we also looked at the Level 3 construction agreement between the Water Development Commission and the Goshen Irrigation District to make sure we weren't in violation of anything there. And we weren't. And the other thing I would point out would be as part of the agreement that was signed, it does have language in there that says if the commission approves and the sponsor elects to proceed, the sponsor shall, regardless of the expected cost of the project, complete the project and be responsible for all actual project costs in excess of basically the $42 million. So there's that reassurance. And then there's also, as part of just general provisions associated with our omnibus bills that are attached to each one of our project, it does give the commission, says if the commission determines that any sponsor has without good cause abandoned completion of a project, that's the sponsor, in addition to being required to repay a loan, if there was one, shall be obligated to immediately repay the full amount of all grant funds actually expended plus interest as established by the state auditor, an amount equal to the interest that would have accrued on the expended grant funds in the water development account from the date of expenditure. I don't know if that would ever be something that the commission would want to do, but there are those provisions, I guess, as part of the omnibus bill, as well as the one I read first in the agreement. So I think the office feels like this is a reasonable approach. We have some backstops. It gives the district some more time, like I already mentioned. So that kind of lays the discussion out. We've got a couple other things we might want to talk about here eventually, but I may pass it over to Kevin to fill in the blanks that I forgot to talk about, and then maybe talk about some of the funds that you're considering going after, or Senator Steinmetz or whoever would like to talk.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Mr. Chairman, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks, Jason. No, I think you outlined that real well. First of all, I'd just like to thank everyone for your support throughout this and continued support. It's been a long road, but we feel like we've made a lot of progress here. We're at 90% design completion here, so we are just ready to go out for bid on the portal and site work, and also in ordering the actual digging machine that will be digging out the tunnel. There's about a 12-month lead time for that to be built, and so that's another reason for this ask now. We also will be ordering the precast lining segments. That's another about a year-long lead time to have those made in time to be installed into the construction of Tunnel 2. So yeah, I guess basically what our ask is that one of the problems in this project is Nebraska's in their funding has been put on a real time constraint with their funding. Their funding has to be utilized by December of 2026, and they're also getting pressure that their funding agency wants it obligated now. They wanted that money accounted for, where it was going to be spent basically in July here, which is why we wanted to, not only for the timing, but to get this digging machine and the precast lining segments ordered, down payments and engineering on that now to start utilizing Nebraska's money so it wouldn't be taken away, because they're being threatened with, they didn't use it and show where it's going to go now that they may lose their funding. So that was another reason for this urgency. And basically another thing that they were being told was, which kind of brought us to this, is on their funding side, they're saying you have enough money to do, one tunnel. You could do complete tunnel 2 with the funding everyone has now. Why aren't you doing that? Whereas, we're kind of being restrained until our project's fully funded for both tunnels. We really, can't commit to it. So, but if we can utilize that 42 million, we would be able to complete all of tunnel 2, all the portal work, site work, and the actual tunnel rehabilitation, and completely restore tunnel 2. And that would give us another 2 years to go after some other funding sources that we're looking into, like Jason mentioned, one of which is that Sherry's been helping us with, and HDR. We did a report here while in between water runs here this season, and did some documentation of the tunnel's conditions and what an emergency this still really is, and that the tunnels have deteriorated considerably since the collapse and in the collapse area of tunnel 2. And if we can get the Bureau of Reclamation to agree that it is an emergency, then they would pay 35% of construction costs, and that's non-reimbursable. So that would be huge. That could be anywhere from 20 to 52 million, depending on whether they declare the emergency on one tunnel or both of them. So that could be a huge funding source. Also, in the meantime, we are applying for another XM loan from the Bureau of Reclamation. That's underway right now. It's not secured yet, but that would be for another $100 million between Gearing Fort Laramie and Goshen Irrigation. That's more than we would need, but they advised us to go ahead and apply for that to make sure it would cover all project costs if we needed it. And then also, we have an appropriations request through Representative Hageman and Representative Adrian Smith from Nebraska for 14.6 million. That has made it out of the Appropriations Committee, and now will go through the House floor and the Senate to be voted on and carried through. Of course, that's not done yet, but it's a good sign that it made it out of the committee. So we are working on those. And like I say, we'd have 2 years to try to secure more funding. And if all else, we would have the loan money to fall back on to complete the project. Because it's pretty sure we would get the 100 million XM loan. We're a pretty big priority project with the Bureau. So that's looking like it would be a pretty good chance that we can secure that. And also, of course, with the passing of the Big Beautiful bill, there's $1 billion being allocated to the Bureau of Reclamation for projects just like this. So we will, as soon as we learn what the application process is for that, we will be applying for that. But we don't know the parameters of what that will be at this time. So that's kind of our ask. And right now, as far as, like I say, we're within a week, if not 2 weeks, of going out for bid on portal work and site work. So we would actually be constructing this fall. We have all of our right of ways in place except for the Bureau of Land Management, which we are told will be secured by September 1. We have our deck review done with the Bureau of Reclamation as far as the tunnel design. They are still reviewing that portal design, but hope to have that completed very soon. That's why I don't know if it'll be within a week or two here before we actually go out to bid on those portals. So also, like I say, I guess that's about it for now, unless you have, I can stand for any questions, and unless we have our project manager from HDR, Marcus Kroll, is online, and also Senator Steinmetz, if they'd like to add anything.
I'd
I'd like to open up for questions. Those online, I'll allow them to join in first before we take any questions from our audience here. Anyone online have any questions or comments? Senator Steinmetz or Marcus?
Mr.
Senator
Chairman.
French?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd be glad to chime in. Kevin covered it pretty well. In visiting with Tara Kinsey at the regional resource manager for the Bureau of Reclamation, she has been a great resource to us and a new contact. She has placed the GID tunnel repair at the top of their requests for funding from the Big Beautiful Bill Act. They are placing that as their top priority in the entire region. So that is an encouraging development. Also, the 35% of both tunnels would be a big win for both Wyoming and Nebraska. Unfortunately, Nebraska was funded through ARPA funds, so as we know, they all have to be expended by 2026. So that is a wrinkle in all of this. But I sent you all an email that contained my letter to the Bureau of Reclamation and also the report from HDR that shows the condition of the tunnels currently. It is quite concerning because this temporary remediation to restore emergency water to the farmers was never intended to last for 6 years. So obviously Tunnel 2 is in horrific shape again. We know that Senator Barrasso's office, Senator Lummis's office, Representative Hageman's office, and the governor's office has all been reaching out to the Bureau also, so that we don't find ourselves in another situation like we did in 2019. So I commend the irrigation district. They've been working very hard on this for a long time. And I thank you for this committee's support and the legislature, and hope that we can make sure to get the funding where it needs to go, and we'll continue to work with our federal government to complete this project in Tunnel 1, but Tunnel 2 is in dire shape, and we really need to see the permanent repair completed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Steinmetz. Anyone else online that would like to comment or have questions? Anyone on the floor here in the meeting that would have any questions or comments? Commissioner Anselmi Dalton.
Thank you, Chairman. So essentially, we've already gotten the loan, I guess this is for you, Jason, for the 59 million from the Bureau of Rec, and then the portions from the 2 states getting us to the 151 million, but they're still going to go take out a further loan for 100 million more. I mean, what's the total cost of this project estimated to be?
Mr. Chairman, I might hand that over to Kevin to explain the numbers and what they might be short of without the new loan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, it gets kind of confusing. Basically, with everything that we have currently, with the XM loan that we currently have at approximately 59 million, Nebraska's funding and Wyoming state funding, we are still short. Let me see here if I can find it. I don't have the total in front of me now. We're still about 60 million short with both Gearing Fort Laramie and Goshen Irrigation. So that is why the extra 100 million was asked for in the extra XM loan. Now that is above and beyond. Right now, our current estimate is 151 million for the total project cost. So that 100 million is in excess of what we need, but that's what the Bureau recommended we ask for. Hope that maybe clears that up.
There's been a lot of numbers thrown around. I'm still a little bit confused.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I don't know if I know the whole story here, but when I add up the numbers, the Bureau loan, ARPA money from Nebraska, and the 41.81 million from Wyoming, I come up with about 124.1 million. And if the cost is somewhere between 150 and 155, then you're short, 25, $30 million, I think. But
I would agree with that. It's just my rough calculations here. That was, but I have a comment regarding the percentage split between the irrigation districts from Wyoming and Nebraska and the estimated total cost. So I'm making an assumption there from the beginning of this conversation that we're being asked to allow the project to proceed using the Wyoming's appropriated 42 million plus the Nebraska's 24 million of ARPA funds, a total of 64 million. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, the way I understand it is Nebraska would use their 24 million first because it's ARPA funds. It has a timeline before it expires. And Kevin, you jump in when I say something wrong. And then after that, Goshen Irrigation District would use the state of Wyoming grant dollars and catch back up because it's going to be 100% Nebraska for a while just to use that ARPA. And then Goshen will jump in with the state dollars to even it back up to 49%, 51%. Am I accurate so far, Kevin?
Yes, you're right.
And then after that, Wyoming would be paying 49% of the cost, and I'm not sure what Nebraska's doing to come up with their 51%. I don't know if they would have to get into the XM loan or what, but I'm not under the understanding that Wyoming would use their dollars for Nebraska's share after everybody gets caught up after the ARPA money is spent.
Right.
Thank you, Director. That was what I won't say it's a concern necessarily, but I wanted a clarification.
And I might ask if that's with Kevin, if that's accurate.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, that is accurate. What the plan is currently, just what you said, we would catch up till we were evened out, and then it would be a 49-51 split throughout the rest of the project. And currently, if Nebraska does not find any more grant funding, they will utilize their XM loan to cover those expenses. And if the ask for the $100 million XM loan does not come in time, then the Bureau said they could redo our contract where Nebraska could take more of the $58 million loan that we currently have in place than their 51%, if that makes sense. And then I did have my number wrong. Going through all these, I had doubled that. I thought the 28 million was just our share that we were short. That's not correct. 28 million is what we lack for the total project in funding. So you were right when you did your math, Jason.
Thank you. So Director, I'll make sure I understand where we're going to be or how we're going to act. We have to take action on this on Thursday.
Mr. Chairman, I would appreciate if both bodies did just get it on the record.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was one of my questions. Would that take action by select water as well? So I think some of you have heard me say this before. I'm going to lobby for this. And I'll tell you why. I don't know if a lot of you here probably do understand. Some of you don't. This irrigation district issue for Goshen Irrigation District does not just affect that district. This is a regional issue. And the reason it is because of the Great Western Sugar Cooperative. That cooperative includes growers in the Yellowstone Valley in Montana, in the Bighorn Basin in Wyoming, and in the Torrington area in Wyoming, as well as into Nebraska and in Colorado. As a grower co-op, the responsibility of that co-op lies with paying not only its grower members, owners of the co-op, but also its employees and overhead. Before the growers are ever paid a dime, they have to cover all the overhead costs. So I'm just going to throw some fictitious numbers out there. And I'm going to say if they have $100 million worth of sugar sales, but it costs $75 million to pay all the employees and keep the factories running, that leaves $25 million to pay the growers. Now, those numbers obviously aren't even close to the reality, but that's the reality of the process. in that they have to pay expenses first. If they have a failure of this tunnel and those growers in that part of this cooperative are not able to produce sugar, it's that much less sugar to sell. If they don't have that sugar to sell, they don't have the money to pay those overhead costs first. They divvy up what's left over amongst the growers. So everyone needs to understand this is not just a Goshen Irrigation District issue. It affects an awful lot more people than just that part of Wyoming and Nebraska. So with that in mind, on Thursday when we discussed that, I'd like everyone to recognize that, to remember that it's much further reaching than just those growers of that irrigation district. Director, I'll turn it back over to you.
Mr. Chairman, the only other thing, everybody understands, I think, that this is a unique project, not only in the cost, but just tunnels and multiple, phases with the tunnel 2, tunnel 1, portals. In our normal process to protect not only the state investment, but also the sponsor that has applied for this project, we would require that, one, the project be fully funded before we give the notice to proceed to go bid the project. In this case, it's unique because we've got not only Wyoming dollars, Nebraska dollars, ARPA, Nebraska dollars, Bureau of Reclamation, a commitment, I think, for these guys to take on more loan from Reclamation if needed, if they can't find some other grant money. So I think we're thinking we will look past that in this case. The other couple of things that are a concern, and again, Kevin mentioned the BLM right-of-way having not been acquired yet, but somewhat of I don't know if it's a verbal or a written promise from the BLM that they'll have that in September. Normally, we would make sure that we have all easements, permits, right-of-ways in place before our office would give a sponsor notice to proceed to go bid a project. It sounds like they're probably going to get to that before they bid it, but I don't know for sure. They're obviously not going to be able to turn dirt until the BLM has, provided the permit. So again, we're willing to be lax on that because this is a unique project. And then the third thing would be, as Kevin mentioned, BLM, I think, has reviewed the designs for the tunnel, but they're in the process of reviewing the design for the portals. And my understanding is, I think just the portals for number 2 are going to be worked on this fall, or is it tunnels, both tunnel portals, Kevin?
Yeah, if it's okay, Mr. Chairman, I'll defer that to Marcus, our project lead HDR, if he's available.
Yes. Hello, Mr. Chair. Marcus Kroll with HDR here through you, and thank you for allowing us to present here. So to answer the question, and I would first address the BLM. It is a valid point. However, we do have the Canals Act right-of-way working in our favor here. It would not be ideal, but we believe the construction could proceed absent some of the temporary easement areas that are being requested. If they absolutely had to, again, that would be not ideal and could potentially impact the cost. So we certainly want those easements from the BLM. And they have committed to us unofficially, of course, but I think there's reasonable optimism that those will be in hand here in time for construction. And regarding the sequence of work, yes, the plan is to attack tunnel number 2 first. Our approach there and recommendations to the district be to bid out all 4 portals, see what comes in on bid day. But the basis of bid would be for tunnel 2 only.
Okay. So where I was going with that was Bureau of Reclamation approval to go, forward with the design on the portals. And, we don't want them to jeopardize any funding opportunities through their reclamation loan. Again, I can't imagine they would start construction before designs are approved by the Bureau. But normally we would say all those approvals need to be in place. Understanding the timeframes and needing to get in there during off irrigation season and bidding the project, we're making an exception, I guess, to move forward with our funding. So I think our concurrence on moving forward, as we've just discussed, would be more concurrence that by the time we get to spending state of Wyoming dollars, all that stuff will be in place because they're going to use the ARPA money first. So if they're in violation of anything, which I doubt they would be, by starting like they're planning to do, it wouldn't involve state of Wyoming dollars at this point. It would be the ARPA money from Nebraska. So I just wanted to be as transparent as possible with the discussions we've all been having between our office and their district and our concerns and timing, but realizing this is complicated and they need to get things moving as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Director. Senator Steinmetz, I believe, has a question or comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My comment would just be that in my discussions with the Bureau of Reclamation, they are working to continue this in an emergency status. And with that, the BLM permit could be expedited. I think it's in that letter. I had looked it up. It's like 12 to 24 days that they can expedite it when they declare this an ongoing emergency, which would be really convenient for the funding measures as well, because that emergency status, which should have never been rescinded because the emergency has never gone away. So as we work through all of this, if the committee could keep that in mind, if you have any interactions on it, it's important to remember that this was never a long-term solution and that it's still under emergency status. So with that, the BLM permitting could be expedited and the funding could be allocated through the Bureau as well. That would access a funding stream that hasn't been there in the past. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Steinmetz. Are there other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman. So
Chairman?
I guess a question I've got is with mechanics. I fully agree we need to get this done. We need to obligate the 24 million in ARPA dollars from Nebraska now. And if we vote to approve that, to bring that in, it's not, in my mind, it might not quite be obligated because it hasn't been through the legislative process. Can anybody help me with that as to whether or not this decision on Thursday would then obligate the money now so Nebraska can use those ARPA funds for us for this project?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Eklund, I believe the Nebraska legislature more or less obligated those ARPA funds on behalf of the Nebraska's portion of the project a couple of years ago, maybe. So there's no action required by the state of Wyoming or any of these bodies in regards to the Nebraska ARPA funds.
Director, I would like an explanation. I kind of have an understanding because I talked with Bill earlier, but a lot of people here probably don't know what the portals are. I wonder if someone could explain that and what that's about.
Marcus, would you like to explain what the portals are? Simply, I mean, it's fairly straightforward.
Yes, Mr. Chair. So those are simply the entrances and exits to the structure, and those are going to be reconfigured to allow this digger shield to complete the mining.
So it's the entrance and exit of the each tunnel.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions in regards to the project and regards to allowing GID to utilize the Wyoming funds up front?
I got a question for Jason. Jason, this has been a big thing for the last several years, and it just seems like it just keeps getting bigger and more complicated and bigger and bigger. Is there do you expect this thing to continue to do this? Is a year from now somebody's going to come out back and say they need another 100 million or another 200 million or some crazy thing, or is there an end in sight when it comes to the dollars?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Cayley, I'm going to kick that over to either Kevin or Marcus because I think that depends on the design and the progress of the design and things that come out of that and with the CMAR process. So
Great.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this is Marcus with HDR. So if the intention of the CMAR process was to get a better understanding of total project costs earlier, and it has at times been painful, and the numbers are obviously not where we wanted them at the end of the day, but what we are at now is a guaranteed maximum price with what we think are very thoroughly vetted contingency buckets that we hope provide a total cost recognition that's never been there before, and one that we can move forward with confidence.
Okay, that sounds good.
Mr. Chairman, I just have one other comment, and it's actually a concern. Assuming everything moves forward like in the best manner possible, the portals are bid and completed during the off season, hopefully this winter. That still leaves at least one more irrigation season.
your mic shut off.
So assuming that we get everything bid, and it's going to happen pretty rapidly for the portals to be completed, they would have to be completed in the off season. And then actual work on the tunnels couldn't even begin for another irrigation season until about a year from now, or a little bit longer, 14 months from now. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, that's the way I understand it is portals this year, tunnel 2 the following year, tunnel 1 the third year.
So in year 2, if everything went perfectly, I know no one knows the answer to this question, is the condition of portal 2's temporary fix good enough to withstand one more irrigation season?
Tunnel 2.
Or tunnel 2, I'm sorry, has that been assessed?
Mr. Chairman, I'll kick that to HDR. Did you hear the question, Marcus?
Yeah, of course, that's difficult to answer precisely, Mr. Chair, but what we have demonstrated in the memo that's been shared now with stakeholders is both of these tunnels are in a dire condition and the state of emergency continues. So I can tell you what will occur next year, actually in conjunction with the portal work, is going to be some pre-excavation grouting by the tunnel contractor. That'll shore up some target zones that we know are problematic, but I don't want to say that's the solution here. And so I would just emphasize to your question, yeah, the state of emergency very much still exists.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Marcus, maybe I wasn't listening closely enough, but you're going to bid out both portals here this summer. If the bids come in good, you're going to do both portals this year, or you're only doing portals for tunnel 2 this year?
No, great question. The basis of bid is for, Mr. Chair, through you, the basis of bid is for tunnel number 2. If we get great bids, I think we evaluate it and make a smart decision with all stakeholders at that time. But to keep the project on its critical path, we're going to focus on only tunnel 2.
So then in year 2, you could have potentially 2 crews working, one actually implementing tunnel 2 and one working on the portals for tunnel 1 in anticipation of year 3 being tunnel 1.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, through you, that is correct.
We hope for the best. That's all we can do, I guess.
Yeah.
Any more questions, comments? Anyone online? Okay, Director, I think.
I've seen that French before.
Okay. Well, appreciate everybody online joining, Senator Steinmetz and the district. I think the next real last thing for the day would be to discuss tomorrow's tour.
Thank you. I think Lisa's going to give us some information. Mark is as well. Go ahead, Lisa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So for tonight, I did ask Old Chicago if they would just kind of reserve us some space out on the patio of Old Chicago. So everyone's welcome to join us if you want. It's kind of a free for all. I just told them whoever wanted to come, you are welcome. I told them between 5:30 and 6. So that's at the Holiday Inn full service. And then Mark will tell you all about the Trona Mine tours. We have people signed up for it. So for those people that are signed up for it, we will leave from the lobby at 6:15 in personal vehicles and some state vehicles. Each mine will have at least 2 cars going out to it. But I will have, since breakfast doesn't open at Old Chicago until 6, I had volunteered and I did go ahead and make breakfast burritos. Hopefully enough for everyone. Maybe about 45 of them. And then I'll have like a little Go-Gurt or something in the orange. And I don't know if people want juice. I'm happy to pick some up and something like that. And you can come down at 5:45. I'll have the breakfast burritos in a little roaster in the lobby or at the desk that you guys could pick up for those who are going on the tour. And then I'll have a little bags with or I might just put it out in a little bucket. And there's coffee down in the lobby. So if people want coffee or other items, I don't know. I know Katie and those guys will have water and pop, or I guess whatever, in each vehicle as we go, and snacks as we go out. But I just want to let you know, go ahead and grab them. I know there was somebody who was gluten-free, so I do have a few gluten-free breakfast burritos, and they'll be separated out. So if you are, that's fine, grab that. And and I guess wear long shirts, but I'll let Mark go into the details of getting out to the Trona and the tour stuff. Mark?
Thank you, Lisa. So tomorrow, we're going to tour 3 mines: Wee Soda, Tata Chemical, and American Soda, which was formerly Solvay. These are all underground mines. We will first have a underground mine tour, and then there will be a surface tour. Each mine will provide lunch. All the mines have encouraged that we and require that we wear a long sleeve shirt. I believe at all the mines there will be coveralls, which should cover that. It could be a little cool in some of these mines, which say 60 degrees. You might want to bring a light jacket. You must have closed-toed shoes. You can't wear open sandals, anything like that, high heels, anything. They have to be closed-toed shoes that they will provide. Make those shoes they'll harden those shoes with a kind of a covering cap on your shoe to provide a steel toe scenario. This project almost exactly a year in the making. Started with Barry asking, can we get a Trona Mine tour? And Katie, Sarah, Barry, David, and Lisa, we've worked all through that time, and we have this tour before us. Each mine can take approximately 9 to 10 people underground. And so the biggest thing tomorrow we have to do is, and thank you, David, for arranging state vehicles. So we're going to go to 3 different mines, and they're in 3 different places. So we need to understand what mine you are going to. Katie emailed the list of what mines were, and do we have copies of that or not? We do. Of what mine you are going to. You do have an email on your computer of which mine you are going to, but I'm going to read those mines.
And Mark, as you read them too, maybe I'm going to drive and you're going to drive. We're both going to Tata.
Right, and I'm going to explain the transportation scenario with David's help. David just kind of disappeared. Oh, there he is. Okay, so the first group is A, and that's Wee Soda Ash. Wee stands for West East Soda, formerly Genesis Alkali. In that tour, we have 7 people now. 2 have dropped out. We have Jason Mead, Barry Lawrence, Lee Craig, Clinton Glick, Dan Larson, Denise Larson, and Tommy Strock. Now, I hope you listen carefully to those names, and you're going to buddy up tomorrow with those folks. And I'm going to assign Jason Mead as the leader of that group. So do we know, David, what vehicles are going to take that group?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I think to make it easier and rather than specify, we brought labels, so we're going to have the vehicles labeled in the window, Group A, Group B, Group C. So as
Okay.
long as the folks know which group they're in, the vehicles that will be transporting them will be labeled with their group.
Okay, great. Good planning. Okay, tour group B goes to Tata Chemical. And that's William Brewer, Sarah Barkston, Lisa Anselmi, Mark Cott, Linda Cott, Greg Kerr, Ken Chestick, Brian Boner, and Bill Alamond. Did I say that right? He's out. Element. Okay. So we're all together in a group, and I believe Lisa's driving. There's going to be a state vehicle, and I can also drive. I mean, but we'll see how everybody packs in. Again, remember your group and who's in that group. And then tour group C, American Soda. That's David Ray. You're in charge of that group, David. Catherine Goodall, Chase Trevally, Patrick Kent, Todd Hosey, Ron Vore, Denise Pence, Gary Crum, Stacy Jones, John Eklund, Martha Lawley, and Roger Lawley. So that's Group C. That's the largest group. There's 12 in that group. And so, pay attention to who you need to be with. And so 6:15, we should leave. We have to be at the mines at 7. We might even be actually at the mines before 7. They're very clearly, it's the West Vaco exit on the interstate, which is about, let's say 35 miles from west of Green River. Is there any questions of the group drivers on what direction we're going on the interstate at least?
Mark, you wrote down the exit too. What do you?
I wrote down the exit number, and of course I don't have that with me.
Okay, so for those that are driving tomorrow, as we carpool, if you get to Little America, you've gone too far, but you won't go that far.
Yeah.
And when you get off, Solvay's when we go on I-80, Solvay is going to be to the left, and it's a pretty straightforward entrance. You just drive underneath I-80 and you go up and you see 3 flags. That one's the easiest one. The other 2 are to the right. And you'd go left on the road, and for us, we go right on the road. And you just look for the admin building at both locations, correct, Mark?
Well, okay, Solvay's to the south.
Mr. Chairman,
They're all the same exit.
if
Go
I
ahead.
could just interrupt. David has reassured me that we have directions to each mine, all the drivers do,
Good.
and that we have the list for who's in groups A, B, and C, so we can have that in the lobby in case anybody didn't get their name written down on which group.
Great.
So we'll have all that stuff. I think we should be good.
It should go without a hitch.
Yeah, great.
So thank you.
I want to express my thanks. This is a little unique. A lot of times we go look at water projects and things like that, and then something unique, but our program is funded by mineral severance taxes. So these Trona Industries and these companies are what they extract, and the revenue that the state of Wyoming gets, portion of that comes to fund this program. So there's a direct connection there. So we appreciate Mark getting this lined up.
Just one other comment on that. These are water projects. These are all junior rights. This is very an important industry on the Colorado River, and our decisions here, and you will hear about that on this tour.
And I just wanted to throw it out that my neighbor was very nice and came down and helped me make the breakfast burrito, Karen Weidel and my mother. I just want to let you all know. So, if you see my mom tonight, tell her thanks for helping me with the cause.
And we're meeting in the lobby of the Holiday Inn Express, right? Full service Holiday Inn. The one that has Old Chicago in it. Okay, in case anybody's not staying there tonight, that's the lobby we're talking about. Okay.
Any other discussion of the tour or any other items? Meeting's adjourned.
Back here on Thursday at 8:30 after that. Okay.